Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome back to some World of Tanks action. So, the next couple of videos are going to have a common theme, and that theme is pain and suffering. So we're going to see some vehicles played that are generally considered to be not amazing, let's put it like that. There's going to be a second video that I'll put out at some point. I'm hoping this week, but we'll see how timing goes. And that's going to feature yours truly driving a vehicle that's kind of infamous, shall we say. But today, in this video, we've got a couple of games from Puffs. So, he is kicking us off driving the Tier 8 American Premium Heavy Tank. It is the M6A2E1, sometimes referred to as the Mutant, because look at that head. So, what is it about this tank that makes it not great? It's actually quite difficult to put your finger on, because if you look at the statistics, it looks alright. In fact, potentially it even looks quite good. Okay, you've got an M6 hull, but the frontal armour is significantly buffed, such that the frontal armour is actually fairly formidable at Tier 8. You've got a fairly mediocre gun, shall we say, or an underwhelming gun. It's the 105mm that you get on the Americans with 320 Alpha, 198 pen. You get it on the T29, you get it on the T32. But here, it's worth pointing out that the Mutant gets limited matchmaking, so you're never having to deal with Tier 10s with this gun. You've got Tier 8s and Tier 9s at worst. So that gives it some room to work, I suppose. So I actually find it quite difficult from just the stats, if you look in-game or if you look in tanks.gg or wherever you might draw your stats info from. It's actually quite difficult to pinpoint why this thing isn't great. But I do think there's a few things here, so we're going to see one of them in just a moment. There have been new Tier 8 premiums added to the game. Now that does not straight off make the Mutant bad, because if we compare it to this 7032 there, for example, the 7032 is clearly the better tank. It doesn't take a genius to work that out. But the 7032 gets full matchmaking. It will see Tier 10s, whereas the Mutant here won't. Okay. I honestly, I don't really know. I don't have an answer for you as to why the Mutant is not great, or is worse than it might appear on paper, but something I would suggest you bear in mind if you're ever considering that question is that the stats don't tell the whole story. So one thing, for example, that you don't see in the statistics about this tank that is true is that it is enormous. If we just, I'm just going to have a look at the side profile of this thing for a moment. I've had situations where, you know, you use a position and you think, I'm well hidden and whatnot, and then you get shot, maybe in the side of the turret, and you think, wow, that must have been a lucky shot, and then you take a look at it, and no, it wasn't a lucky shot. It's just from where you're positioned, the enemy can actually see the entire side of your turret, and it's massive. Like, just compare it to the 122 TM behind it, for example. The 122 TM is much easier to hide. So, it's just something to bear in mind. I'm not saying that's the reason why this thing isn't as good as it appears on paper. I'm just trying to say there are factors that matter that aren't obvious if you just look at the statistics of the vehicle. Anyway, the game in question, Puffs finds himself, good news, bad news situation, you know. He's top tier here. This is a Tier 8 maximum game. This is 357 matchmaking. There are Tier 6s to shoot. This is exactly the sort of game. And there's a city to fight in. This is precisely the sort of game that the Mutant loves. However, bad news, he had to go round and face off against a 7032, which is just a superior vehicle. Now, he was able to deal with the guy, and to anyone who's going, oh, but he just fired gold ammo. Yeah. Against the 7032 with this gun, you have to. You have sub 200 penetration with your regular AP rounds. That does not reliably penetrate the front of the 7032, regardless of where you aim, basically. So, not using APCR in that situation would have been stupid. So Puffs made the right call there, in my opinion. And you can see he's not being completely frivolous with it now that he knows he's against targets against whom, you know, he can actually penetrate, especially if he knows where to aim. Then he's just firing armor piercing. Anyway, he's up to over 2,000 damage for what it's worth, and he's up to 4 kills. Of course, in order to have a game like this, you kind of need your team to not be pulling their weight, and yeah, his team's not. Now, overall, if you have a look at the minimap, this is actually a kind of awkward situation. So the team has captured the town. Great. If this were an encounter game and there were a capture circle at F1, that would actually mean that the friendly team could really force the enemy team's hand. They could force them to come into the city and brawl with them. And if you have a look at the tanks left alive on the enemy team, their most obvious brawling tanks are gone. I mean, the 7032, for example. But they do still have the AT-15A, for example, but that's a tier lower, and anyway. So that would be an option, but this is a standard game, so that's not an option. And Puffs is trying to pick out shots here. He's going for the weak point here. I would say, right, so he's firing gold ammo here. If you're going to aim for the weak spot on top of that tank, the AT-15A, there is no point shooting gold ammo, because you'll penetrate that weak spot with regular AP, and if you miss the weak spot, doesn't matter what ammo you're firing, you're not going to do damage. If you're going to fire gold, that is the much more sensible place to aim for. That section on the side of the AT-15A where the armour is flat. And you can see there that Puffs was trying to aim for weak points initially, but his shots just weren't landing. This gun is not very accurate in the slightest, and that's a rectal progetto. Nobody wants a rectal progetto. That tends to end poorly. Really wanted a high damage roll just there, and Puffs is trying to, this is a slightly mercenary move perhaps, but trying to position himself such that the progetto can't shoot him, and he's actually able to get a really fine shot there into the progetto. Didn't need the APCR rounds in the slightest. AP would have done fine, but it is what it is. APCR round here for the AT-15A, however, is probably sensible. Puffs doesn't have the time to mess around here. His team is wilting around him and has been all game. He needs to be killing stuff. So he couldn't afford to sit there and keep missing the weak spot all day. He would have died. Again, given the situation, that's a very sensible use of your APCR ammo, and that's a Jagdpanther 2, and that's a corpse. But he leaves Puffs on less than 300 hit points, and these guys are not stupid, they're just going to swarm a sucker him. T-52 manages to bounce 2 of his shots, and Puffs is now in a really awkward situation, manages to kill the T-52, and, he didn't kill the T-52, his friend in the 122 does, and Jagdpanther fluffs his shot, and Puffs is able to kill him, and suddenly, there's just a one-shot EBR left, wondering where all his friends went. Of course, Puffs is also a one-shot, but, you know, c'est la vie. Now, you might notice the cap circle is no longer progressing. This EBR is not in the cap circle. Some players would have tried that. Some players would have been wrong. The advantage that the EBR has in this situation is its bonkers, insane mobility and good camo. If he's in the cap circle, then he's advertising his position to both Puffs here and to Puffs' newfound platoon mate in his 122 TM. And if you're advertising your position to those two tanks, you're throwing away one of your main advantages, not being seen. And then using your mobility to relocate. So this EBR is also on 3 kills, so we have to assume this guy isn't a donut. We have to assume he even vaguely knows what he's doing. Interestingly, Puffs is loading the HE here. Now, I don't know. Well, no, we do know. We know that EBR was on very low hit points. And so the HE round in this case, I think, makes sense. Those French-wheeled light tanks are notorious for having, let's call it, an interesting armour layout, which means that you can find yourself in the position that you shoot at a bit of the tank that you think there'll be a hitbox for, and there just isn't. So loading the HE round here makes sense. Then all Puffs needs to do is hit the guy, the HE round will explode and probably do enough damage to kill him. And that is useful. Now, the two here are splitting up, but I get it, because Puffs' spider sense is kind of tingling. But because these guys are split up, they're becoming isolated, it is easier for the EBR to pick them off. Having said that, they kind of need someone watching the rear, and, well, the EBR can, I guess, sort of bore this match out a bit. And may well be out in the field somewhere. Puffs could start capping here, and then that forces the EBR's hand. The problem is, of course, if the EBR is able to find a shot into Puff's side, or maybe even a HE round at this point, given Puff's hit points, then that would be all she wrote for Puffs here. Yeah. Go figure. Just for anyone who's curious, by the way, at the time when this game was played, it was patch... It's back in February, can't remember the patch number. So we're... because I believe, I haven't actually logged into World of Tanks for a short while, but I believe they did actually go through with the HE changes. But if you're at the time at which you're watching this, HE mechanics have been changed. This was recorded, or this was played, sorry, before that happened. So HE is a bit more reliable in this scenario. There's the EBR, the 122 manages to find him. Can the 122 kill him? He's on 14 hit points. Come on, good sir, come on. Well, the EBR knows where Puffs is, and unfortunately the EBR... Yeah, I'm not sure he really played this as well as he could have done, and, well, that's really all she wrote there, let's be honest. And that is the game. So, let's go and have a look at the stats for this one. So, there we go. That's a very impressive haul of medals there from Puffs. Ace, Tanker, Hand of God, Bruiser, Fighter, Duelist, Shellproof, Cool-Headed, Brothers in Arms, Crucial Contribution, High Caliber, Steel Wool, Top Gun, and Radley Walters medal for those 9 kills, and, of course, the cheeky platoon at the end, netting them those 2 platoon medals. Very nicely done. 3,981 damage done, 9 kills, 1,601 base experience. Shout out to Real X1818 in his 122 TM, just shy of 2k damage from him. 4 kills, 839 base experience from him. Commiserations to the enemy Hotchkiss at the end. That's not the easiest map to play necessarily in a light tank, because a lot of the meaningful engagements tend to take place in the town, in my experience. But shout out to him for trying to make that work at the end. It just, it didn't. Let's be honest. 24 shots fired, 20 hits, 17 penetrations for that damage count. Most of it was done from point blank range. 22 hits received, 8 penetrated, 14 did not, for over 2,000 damage blocked by Puff's armour there. 1 enemy vehicle spotted. Who did Puff spot in the end? Oh, the AT-15A. Fair enough. Fair enough, this isn't a scout vehicle, but whatever. 11 enemy vehicles damaged, 9 of them destroyed, 740 assistance damage, 38 base capture points, 2.5 kilometers travelled. And yes, Puffs did fire quite a few APCR rounds there, but frankly, in the situation that he was in, if he hadn't, his team would probably have lost. Because he would have died, he wouldn't have been able to deal with the targets that he needed to quickly enough, and then they'd have killed his 122 friend. So, in that situation, 100% the right call, in my humble opinion. So that's the first game. It's the M6 Mutant, and I mentioned this was kind of about pain and suffering, so with that in mind, game number 2. So here we go then. This is the setter. Oh, God. For anyone that doesn't know, this is the Tier 7 British light tank. Now, the British light tanks in general are considered a lackluster bunch. And I decided, so Puff sent me a couple of replays in the setup, and I could have picked the game on Malinovka. Malinovka? No. On Prokhorovka, sorry. With lots of assistance damage and whatnot, but I chose not to. Instead, I thought, let's pick the game on Lakeville in a Tier 9 match, and we'll see how this goes. So, what's wrong with the setter? Well, the thing with the British light tanks in general is they're not very fast. They don't have very good guns. They don't have very good view range. And if that's sounding like it could be quite an unpleasant combination, it's because it is. And Wargaming sell this line by saying they've got naval guns, if that's some sort of indication that the guns are big and do lots of damage. Like, let's just put this in some sort of context. There have been plenty of warships over history in the 20th century that have used 76mm guns, for example. You're not going to be particularly impressed with a 76mm gun on your Tier 7 light tank, are you? Speaking of which, this is a 75mm gun on a... Hello T28, how are you today? Bye. This is a 75mm gun on a Tier 7 light tank. So, you get 135 average damage. It's low alpha damage. You get 180 pen, which is fine. You get a pretty atrocious reload. And you're just not very fast. Basically, these things are dedicated passive spotters that rely on their camo to get that done, because their view range isn't actually very good, and their camo isn't always very good either, and you just end up thinking, why am I driving these? I could be driving anything else. Now, I haven't played the setter yet myself. I've been suffering through the Crusader again. Again, Chip, why are you doing that? Well, I played the Crusader to unlock the Cromwell many, many moons ago, when it was medium tank, or it was a light tank at the time. It then became a medium tank, then it went back to being a light tank. Wargaming can't work out what they want to do with it, and now I have to play it again to get to the setter. And why would I want to get to the setter? Well, because I don't know, I'm a masochist. Anyway, right, enough complaining. What Puffs is actually doing here is potentially really valuable. He's using these bushes over by the side of the lake here on Lakeville to do some spotting. And if you play this carefully, you can do a lot of good work here. It helps if the enemy light tanks don't try and counter this play, of course. And with that in mind, it's probably useful that the enemy 1357 has gone up to the great French light tank graveyard in the sky. But there is a 1375 still around, I suppose. So you can get some good spotting done here, and remember, Puffs is in a Tier 9 match here. Can you imagine? Well, you don't have to imagine, I'm sure plenty of you have done it, but if you're in Tier 7s and you're trying to plink Tier 9s for 135 damage per shot, you at least want a decent rate of fire to go with that, right? But you don't get that. Oh, and just to add insult to injury, the ammo capacity on these tanks sucks. So what that means is that you can't spam people with shots. Have to make your shots count. So you have a gun that doesn't do much damage and doesn't carry much ammo, so you have to make the shots count, and doesn't have very good DPM or a good reload either, which means that to make your shots count, like you have to take some APCR. Honestly, I think Puffs' ammo loadout here is suboptimal. If you were really going to min-max this on the setter, you'd want to take basically all APCR, because you can't afford your shots not to connect. Now, that's prohibitively expensive. I wouldn't do that, because I don't want to be spending tens of thousands of credits every single game in this damn tank. And it may well be that Puffs is using the same logic here, but if you really wanted to, that's what you should do. And, right, I'm going to stop complaining. Let's just focus on Puffs here, because I don't think this game's necessarily going to be all that long. So, he's already managed to rack up almost 4,000 assistance damage, and he's just broken over 700 actual damage himself. Hey! Plink. Plink. Right. I mean, it helps that his team shot the things he was spotting, and that the enemy team really didn't do very well. And many things came together to make this game work. Thankfully. But it's all been quite a painful experience. Now Puffs is loading the APCR here, because again, you need to make these shots count. Oh dear. Right, Lerva over here. If Puffs can get around the side or rear of this gentleman, then the APCR doesn't really matter. He's going for a look to see what he's going to have. He's going to have side and rear shots. So he could load AP here. He doesn't need to be loading APCR. This is a little gratuitous, if we're going to be honest. But, I mean, it's his credits. Spend him how he wants. He's probably at this point just frustrated and just wants the damage. But if you notice, the Puffs is actually keeping this guy permatracked in the process, which is nice. But look at how quickly Puffs is killing this guy. Look at this reload for 135 alpha damage. Look at it. Fear it. Hey! He got a kill! Yay! 3 of them left. Good lord. Anyway. So that's the Lerva dealt with. We've now got... Oh, no, the SU's gone. So we've now got a T-30 and a Skoda. Skoda was last spotted round this corner. Someone's trying to cap this out. For reasons. Maybe he's got a mission, to be fair to him, that requires cap points. I don't know. T-30's all the way down there by the IS-6. And Skoda, well, the Skoda can delete Puffs in one magazine, which is why Puffs is still playing this a bit cautiously, because he's a tier 7 light tank in a tier 9 world. Well, can we find this guy? Oh, there he is. Round trouser moment. Well, he's flubbed one shot. He's got 2 more left in the mag. Wait for the gun to reload. Oh, there's one connection, but the guy can't finish Puffs off with the rest of his magazine. But this gun fires so slowly that the Skoda will probably be able to reload his magazine before Puffs will be able to kill him. If it was a one-on-one engagement anyway. And actually, the Skoda rams the Hellcat and they destroy each other. And that just leaves the T-30 down by the Challenger, and with any luck... Oh, don't let the base capper win, please. Kill him! Everyone gets more XP if you kill them. For those who don't know, there is an XP multiplier that is relating to the number of enemy tanks that are left alive. So, if there are 0 enemy tanks left alive, i.e. you've killed them all, your entire team physically gets this XP multiplier. If there's any left, then you get a smaller multiplier, as is the case here. Anyway, the T-30 survives, which is a bit annoying. Puffs could have farmed up another 2 shots of damage there, although the T-30 could also have just killed Puffs. He's got 545 hit points left at this point, so go figure. There we go. There's a couple of painful games for you. Let's just finish things off by looking at the stats of this match. So there we go. Everything came together there to allow Puffs to have quite a nice game, despite the suboptimal situation that he found himself in, basically. You're in a terrible tank, you're bottom tier, you know, all that good stuff. But his team came through and they had a good game. Ace Tanker, Spotter, Fire for Effect. No massive shiny medals here or anything, but that's a good, consistent game. 2,216 damage done, 1 kill, 1,453 base experience. Really good contribution from Puffs there. Commiserations, I suppose, should go to the enemy Skoda T50 and the Progetto there. They both had a good go at that game, but it just wasn't enough to pull their team over the line. 19 shots fired, 18 hits, 18 pens for that damage count, most of which was from fairly close range. 1 hit received, it penetrated, you're driving a light tank, go figure. 7 enemy vehicles spotted, 6 damaged, 1 destroyed, 4,380 assistance damage there. And because Puffs fired a good chunk of APCR, and in that match, not all of it was really necessary, Puffs made only a very slender profit, and if he'd been running a regular account, that'd have been a loss. It is what it is. Anyway, there's a couple of games for you there in rather underwhelming machines. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.